Welcome back to Spill the Soup, the podcast that gives you insight into the life of a 2021 teenager in these incredible times. I'm your host, Marley Camito, and in honor of May being Mental Health Awareness Month, this week we're going to be talking about all things mental health and how we can protect our peace as teenagers. Today I am joined by two guests, Shayna Kaplan and Charlie Nierenstein. Welcome both of you to the show, and thank you so much for being here today. If you both would like to introduce yourselves, I would say your name, your age, and your favorite stress-reducing technique you use whenever you feel anxious.
I'm Charlie. I'm about to turn 18 in 2 days, or tomorrow. And this is a favorite stress-reducing technique, I'd say. It's probably just, what I do is I try to find one thing in a group that I know that I'll be comfortable in, so then I can put myself into a comfortable scenario if I'm in something that's uncomfortable.
I like that.
I'm Shayna. I am almost 18 as well, less than 20 days to go. And what I do is I try to distract myself and change the channel in my mind to focus on something else.
Wonderful. I personally like to kind of let everything all out. I'm a very vocal person, hence why I like talking so much on this podcast. And I think instead of bottling everything in, finding kind of an outlet, whether it's a person, a journal, anything like that, to kind of let go of everything you've been feeling. But before we start getting into more of that, per usual, I wanted to just take the time to restate that we intend to keep today's conversation as open, authentic, and honest as possible. Shayna, Charlie, and I will be sharing completely opinion-based information today, and everything that we talk about is simply from our personal experiences and other feelings, not based on any strict facts or arguments. But with that being said, we can get right into the episode. So first, if it's okay with you guys, I wanted us to start off by talking a little bit about our childhoods and any predominant moments in your lives where you felt your mental health was most impacted. I just thought this was a good way to kind of allow the audience to familiarize with us and open up our conversation to more in-depthly focusing on these instances later on in the conversation. But I don't know, basically share just sort of the from then to now experiences you've had dealing with any tough mental battles. And I can start since I know this is a little difficult to jump right into some pretty personal stuff. But I don't know. I always kind of tell people my parents divorced when I was 7. And so I have to kind of emphasize that it's a good divorce. And I know there's no good divorce, but my parents are still great friends to this day. And they really just wanted the best life for my siblings and I. But as a 7-year-old, that's something pretty hard to understand. And so that left me dealing with a lot of feelings like fear of abandonment. I had to sleep with both of my parents until I was in 6th grade. And even though the divorce ended up being okay, it was still kind of traumatizing. And that mixed with being the oldest of 3 in my family, I had a lot of perfectionism and wanting to set a good role model or be a good role model for my siblings while also making sure I was okay with my parents. So that brought on a lot of anxiety later in my life, even though a lot of teenagers experience anxiety. But now, recently, all throughout high school, I've been working on dealing with my anxiety better and kind of finding these techniques to get us all through the day. So what about you guys?
I think that my struggle with mental health started when I was a toddler. I used to scream and cry every day when my mom would drop me off at preschool. I had separation anxiety from my parents, and I don't really know what led to it, but that's just how it was. And then at some point, it turned into me just being a typical worrier. I worried about everything. And then I would say once I got into middle school is when I was really aware of it. It turned into test anxiety, and it started to impact my how I did in school. And then that's when I started kind of being more aware of the situation and getting some help.
Well, for me, it's kind of a contrast from you two, I'd say. I had a pretty happy-go-lucky childhood, I'd say. But I'd say around fourth, fifth grade. I'm the short kid. So um, that's when I probably started feeling my first taste of anxiety was through embarrassment of like always being like the one picked on for my height or like just made fun of. And so like that, like I don't know, I just hated the feeling of embarrassment from that. And then that was like my first taste of social anxiety. And then so then I always just had like in the back of my mind this thought of people judging me. First thing they see is my height. It's the first thing that they're gonna think. And so I'd say probably that is what sparked everything of my social anxiety. But then fast forward to ninth grade. It was a pretty chaotic year, I'd say. Both of you know the situation. Uh, again, it was a social event. Did not help my social anxiety. A certain scenario happened, and then probably I'd say that was probably one of my lowest um, valleys of the mountain valley um, type scenario. Because both of you know what happened. I won't go into details, but
But to give a little background, it was kind of relationship wise or dealing with our peers. And so that's enough
yeah,
said.
and yeah, like that was probably the first time that I felt like um, trust issues, and
Hmm.
like I've been working on it since, but have not. I still have not gotten back to where I was before that, and then sophomore year, it all came back again on the Israel trip,
Oh,
and um,
wait. How
like
so? Elaborate a little on that.
okay, like the people were on the same Israel trip, and I already was having a bad time just because I had no food because I'm allergic to everything in Israel, and in Europe I couldn't eat anything because all the places that our youth group set up for us, they couldn't guarantee I could eat it. So like I literally went to a Poland supermarket and bought $20 worth of like 250 Oreos, and
Oh
that's
my
all I
God.
had. And like so I was already pissed off because I was not eating anything. And then like um just like I had not like I and ninth grade is when I started therapy too, just because of what happened. I just needed it. And so I'd say like the Israel trip was like I was already in a bad state of mind just from not having the proper diet, and then just like I don't know, because that was like probably the first time I've been around that group again
Mhm.
since everything, and like that was probably just a trigger. And so then most people know now, most people don't. It's a kind of 50-50, but I did end up coming home early, and so it was something that I was embarrassed about at the time, but through like reflection and like just going back and thinking on it, coming home was the right decision for me because I was in such a bad spot in Israel. And so I'd say uh, that's been my journey so far. It's
Yeah.
just a lot of ups and downs. Childhood was up, middle school to early high school, all down.
But I'm
Hopefully
proud
around
of
enough
you
going into college though.
because you know how to look out for yourself too. You knew that was the right decision for you. And that's not something easy to make, especially when as teenagers, we're constantly worried about the way other people view us. So good for you, Charlie.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, especially with that situation, I used to have FOMO. Now I have none, just because like I missed out on like 3 weeks of the Israel trip, which was like the entire part of Israel. And I have just developed like I don't if I'm missing out on something, I really do not care anymore. Like before, I'd be like so pissed off. Oh, I wasn't invited. Oh, but like now I'm just like I don't care. It's like whatever. And so I also think that like just it was like a blessing in disguise because it also helped me like get over stuff like that. Like yes, I didn't get to stay on the trip with all my friends, but I also felt like I grew up in making the decision that was best for me instead of just staying in a place where I was absolutely horrible for like another 21 days.
Yeah, that's really good self-awareness. But you kind of touched on this earlier, and it kind of leads into my next topic. And I'm not sure how open you guys are sharing a little bit about this, but I know that one helpful resource we're all involved in is seeing a therapist. Not the same one, though. But I've always felt that there's this stigma surrounding therapy, and I wanted to hear if you guys have noticed that and what your thoughts were regarding it. Charlie, you talked a lot about feeling embarrassed, and something that a lot of other people face, and I'm not sure if you guys have, is feeling embarrassed to admit that you're seeing a therapist or that you go to therapy. And it's kind of this concept that you're afraid of feeling judged for it, even though, I don't know, I love therapy. I think it's very helpful. I think everybody should see a therapist, honestly. But I wanted to hear what you guys have thought, if you've ever felt embarrassed by it, and what your thoughts regarding that stigma were.
For me personally, I like going to therapy, but do I like people knowing I go to therapy? No. But like ninth grade, I missed so much school in ninth grade because I was going to therapy like every day, and everybody would ask me, "Why are you leaving school? Why are you leaving school?" And I came up with BS reasons because I did not want anyone to know, and so it's more of like, for me, it was just like, it was like the overall stigma of guys having mental health, of um I like growing up, I just have always, like, especially in like movies or like just social media, like there was just like nothing on that guys could feel like what I was going through, and so I just had the fear of being judged on that, and like that my feelings weren't valid, or like it would make me look like I was below people because of what I was feeling, and so like during that time I didn't want anyone to know, but like fast forward to now, I'll be like, yeah, I'm just going to therapy. I got an hour more therapy, and then um, I find it like uh, for people who don't like therapy, it's because like, well, from my experience, you need to find the right one for you, because um, the, the therapist is there to make sure that you're okay and they want to help, but it's a matter of fit for basically everyone. So the people that like say that they don't want to go to therapy, I'd say you have to try it. You should try it out, and you just want to find the right fit, even if it's a matter of just going through different therapists.
I can agree. I used to be ashamed that I went to therapy. I used to be so embarrassed. I started going to therapy actually when I was in 5th grade. I guess it kind of goes down a little alleyway, but I was struggling with really bad migraines, and all my doctors, after not being able to find a cure, they like blamed it on my anxiety and just thought I was like making up the whole headache thing, and sent me to therapy. And I got really creeped out by this therapist, some old lady. We used to meditate together, and then she would tell me to like close my eyes, and once I peeked open my eyes and she was just staring at me, and from then on I never went back to her. But I think it took me like 3 or 4 therapists to then get to the one that I have now. I took a break for a while, and then I would say in like 8th or 9th grade I went back, and I love therapy. It's like the best thing ever. I look forward to it every week. No matter if I'm in a good place or a bad place, I always have something to talk about. Usually I don't realize how badly I needed it until I'm there. And yeah.
I agree. I feel like you don't ever need to consider yourself mentally ill or unstable to see a therapist. And total honesty, I said this before, but if it were that easy, I honestly believe that everyone should be seeing one, because we all deserve and need a lot of the time, like, someone to sit there and just listen to us and help guide us towards working through hardship and getting through our personal problems. Like, one thing my therapist taught me is, like, on the first day, she told me, I'm not a therapist, I'm a life coach. And that's exactly like how I like to think of it now. Like, I'm being coached on life. So I love that. And I think everybody needs a little life coach. But I don't know if either of you can remember what is kind of like your favorite piece of advice that any therapist has really given you. That was it for me, like life coaching and thinking of it as we all need some help. But I don't know if there's anything special that you guys have heard that's really stuck with you over the years that you wanted to share.
I would just say, like, since I've been seeing my therapist for so long, she's seen me come out of so much. And she's really like taught me like my value and my worth. And so sometimes she's the one to realize like what's going on in the situation. She knows me better than myself.
For me, it was like the topic of like validity and like everything that I'm feeling is valid, because I thought it was just me being crazy and like just like and because I thought it was just like initial blowback from like what happened in ninth grade, like that one night in ninth grade. But like it was honestly, I wasn't doing well before that, so it was just like it was just like a build up to everything, and like I just thought that what I'm feeling wasn't real, and like it would all just go away, but like that's not how it works. And so I'd say my biggest advice was just like telling yourself that it's real and it's valid, and like everyone goes through something, and like it's not something to hide or be ashamed of, and in most cases it actually helps to talk about it.
Yeah. And Charlie, you touched on this earlier, but this is such an important topic, and one of the reasons I was really excited to have you on this week. And so this question is more geared towards you, but I feel like you obviously have very different experiences to some extent than Shayna and I on the topic of mental health and your personal well-being as a teenage boy, which is a sad and awful, but like ultimately just a reality that our society faces. And you mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but I wanted to hear like how difficult it really is or has been over the years for you to open up in general, or even just right now on this podcast, like whenever you're talking about your feelings. Like, do you ever feel pressure to sugarcoat them, or are you ever not necessarily embarrassed, but almost ashamed, like for feeling the way you do? And you said like guys are supposed to be so strong, but I wanted to hear if any other teenage boy is listening to this, like what, if there was one piece of advice that you could go back and tell yourself as a ninth grader or a 10th grader or any of that when dealing with the pressure of boys aren't supposed to cry and boys aren't supposed to have feelings like that or go to therapy, what would it be and how would that impact you?
Don't listen to that, because none of that is true. Okay, like that was like exactly what I was thinking when I was doing like going through all of that. It's like I didn't tell my friends anything because I don't feel comfortable opening up to them. It's not like a thing with them. It's just like with me, I find like that girls understand better because guys just don't like talking to each other about feelings. And so like they'll be like if I tried to talk to them, they'll be there for me obviously, but like it's like they won't really understand, or they like don't want to say that they understand because they don't want other people to know if they do.
Oh.
And like it's just stuff like that where it's like no guys want other guys to know that they're actually going through the same thing. And so like that's where I found that I do better opening up to females instead, because they're more open about like that they understand and like that they know. And so like as to the part of like opening up to other guys, I'd say no, I don't do well with that, because so I've found myself like if I'm with other dudes, like if I'm not like I like to be a quiet person. I'm not a talkative person, but like if I'm quiet, all my friends will think something's wrong, or like they'll just be like, "Oh, why are you so depressed today? You look like you're depressed." Like they're not even saying it because they know what's happening. Like I am, but like they don't know that because I don't tell them anything. And so I have to like put on this fake persona that like, oh, I'm a loud ass person, and or like that I'm like all energy all the time. But like that's not me. I like to just be quiet and like just keep to myself. And so I'd say like putting on that fake persona every time I'm in public is so exhausting. And it's like that's like the biggest downside of what like trying to sugarcoat everything just because I didn't want people to know. It's like especially like the closest people to me, I didn't want them to know because I was ashamed of it because like I'd never seen any other guy go through what I was going through just because that's not in the media and it's not talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought like I was the only person. So I tried to sugarcoat everything, and like I was so tired of doing that, and like my friends still think that I'm like this energetic dude who like all the time. But no, I'm just a quiet kid who likes to keep to himself. Like you guys know, I didn't hang out with anyone for like a year and I still didn't care. Like I didn't care. Like I was fine keeping to myself. Like I'll have days where I want to hang out with people, but if I don't really care. It's like stuff like that. And like for me personally, I'd just give advice of saying like don't do the mistake that I did of trying to be somebody you're not, because in the end, you're gonna end up being who you are, but it is way more exhausting than it needs to be if you just try to be somebody that you're not.
Do you ever wish that things were different or that other guys talked about their feelings, or do you think that like things are easier this way and it's better to kind of leave your feelings at home to some extent?
No, it's exhausting leaving your feelings at home because then you have to put on like the mask of like, oh, everything's fine. But like if you just put on that mask, it's hard to take off because you just leave it up all the time then. And so I think talking about it and just being vulnerable with everyone is like the easiest way. Like it's hard, but it's easiest way to get to being the genuine self that you are.
That's really well said. But something I've noticed as teenagers, no matter what gender, we all know how hard it can be at times to really place ourselves in vulnerable positions and be completely honest about our feelings or mental health. And I don't know, especially in such a competitive and sometimes toxic, if I'm being totally honest, environment. I was wondering if you guys ever felt that our friends or peers or classmates or just whoever, other teenagers really served as support systems or rather just another way to feel judged. And just kind of like I'm asking, what has the impact of other people's opinions really meant to you guys as teenagers and in this era of caring so much about what other people think of us?
Meant everything. Literally, I felt like I needed to be approved by everyone I came across, and so it was so toxic, as you said. Like, just wanting to like I don't need the approval of everyone to be happy, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I do.
So did you feel like you were being judged whenever you would try to open up about your mental health, or did you feel like your friends would support you if you were honest with them?
No, they were supportive. It's just I don't do it that often because like it's like guys like are just like it's like known because stereotype and the stigma like guys don't share their feelings with each other that often, so just none of us do. And so I just feel like if it was more like normalized, it wouldn't be this big of an issue. But like the fact that it's not talked about of guys just hanging out and sharing their feelings whenever, like that's just not a thing that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not that I feel judged just because it happens like not that often. Like they're supportive when it happens, it just does not happen that often. So I can't like um really say that um like I can't really say that like they're not supportive because they are, but it's just the frequency in which it happens.
I would say my close friends all support. For me, when I am having a hard time, it's like a domino effect. Like it will really be one thing going on, but then like the littlest inconvenience happens and I just like break out into tears. And so I know that like my peers sometimes see me as like a crybaby or like extra emotional, whatever. But it's how I react to it. I don't know. But like it's really good for me to just like sit down and like Marley and I talk about our feelings and like share our emotions like all the time. Like that's just what we do.
Yeah, that never happens
Yeah.
with guys.
Yeah. Well, Charlie, you're welcome to join in on our kumbaya
Definitely.
whenever you want. So yeah.
I think, I don't know, something that's kind of helped me understand what I'm going through and help me kind of open up sharing what I'm going through is that every single other teenager is likely going through something very similar. Pain is relative, and we all have our own battles to be fighting. Sometimes I've dealt with a lot of like, why me? Like, I have the worst luck. Like, the worst things only happen to me, and my friends have such better lives. And like, that just shows how competitive everything is as teenagers. It's like, who's less depressed? Who has a better life? Like, we are all going through our own thing, and like, you never know what somebody else is going through behind closed doors. Like, even Charlie, as you've been sharing about other guys and how it's difficult that you experience these feelings, but you feel like nobody else does because they don't share it. Like, for all we
I
know,
had no idea what anyone else was.
exactly. Like, for all we know, people could go home and cry, or like they keep their feelings to themselves. And it's hard to act, what I've learned, like to act like I have it so much worse than anyone else because I have no idea what so many of my friends are going through because people aren't as vocal about it. And so it's hard to judge or be quick to jump to conclusions that you are the only person struggling and it matters so much what you're going through and no one else, because pain is relative. But on the topic of caring about what other people think, I wanted to shift our focus over to the impact of social media, especially in terms of like mental health support, awareness, all that stuff. So, on a scale, would you guys say that social media platforms like Instagram serve as more of a helpful resource or a harmful one? And I guess, I don't know, this kind of derives from like the darker sides of social media, like the competition, the pressure to look like someone different as your media presence, like that kind of thing. How social media isn't real life and you can act like this perfect person on your Instagram page, but really be struggling and going through the darkest time of your life outside of social media. So I wanted to hear what you guys thought about that.
I think also to add to that list, like FOMO. Like FOMO is so real with social media. But I think that social media can be super nice to like keep in contact and like nice to store your photos and whatever, but it can be really harmful. Like so many people cover up everything that they go through just by making their lives look absolutely perfect, including like celebrities. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's been a lot of conversation about making like Instagram like casual again. And like a lot of people have like private Instagrams, and that's where they sometimes share their emotions. But I don't know, our like main public Instagrams are very glorified.
What do you think, Charlie?
I'd give it on the scale side. I'd give it like a 5, honestly. And it's in the middle for me, just because it depends on what you're following. I think because like with what Shannon said, I don't really have. I don't like I said before. I don't have FOMO anymore, just because of my past experiences. And like I'm not saying that's not a real thing, because it is, because I had it, but just from the growth of what I've gone through, it's just not a thing that I have anymore. And so I'm taking that into account of my personal experiences on social media, because like I agree with the side that like people are gonna use it to put up a mask and seem like everything's fine even if it's not. And but like the stuff I follow is like I follow a lot of like mental health sites too on Instagram specifically, and I find like just seeing those in my timeline help a lot, because there's this page called the Real Depression Project, which I actually love because um, it has posts like what actually causes anxiety, and then it says it's not being quote unquote dramatic, and then it has a whole slideshow of stuff like that, and then it's other stuff like on the other side is like 50 ways to reach out to someone without asking how are you, and try and making it seem awkward, and without making it seem awkward. It's just like stuff like that, and I have other pages like that too. I recommend following. And it's just stuff like that is like where the good part of social media, I feel, outweighs some of the bad.
I love that. That's so cute. And Shayna, you kind of touched on this earlier with celebrities, but I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on the concept of influencers, which for anyone listening who's unfamiliar with what that means is basically just people with large social media presences or followings, and that their followers or other people look up to and use them as these like role models. So their posts and online activity serves as like influences for what their followers should be doing. And so I've heard a lot about these mental health influencers. And I was talking to a parent before we recorded this that was telling me about how her daughter is really struggling with this because people on TikTok or Instagram are explaining what kind of mental troubles that they go through or mental illnesses they have or other kind of phobias and stuff like that. And her daughter almost seemed to be like adopting them and saying this person has them, so do I, and acting like rather than raising awareness to these struggles, the influencer was kind of like normalizing it. And this parent is struggling with like how to teach her daughter that like, no, it's not a trend to be mentally unstable. And I don't know if I'm wording that right. I'm sorry. But I wanted to hear if you guys had noticed that, especially I know we're older, but because social media is becoming such a normalized thing for younger kids and other teenagers, it's very different. And I just wanted to hear if you've noticed that or what your thoughts were on kind of normalizing a lot of things that should not be normalized.
Well, let me tell you, if you don't have, if you're not mentally ill, you don't want to be. That's not something that you're missing out on. But I don't know. I think that it can be really helpful for like I think about like Demi Lovato and like how she's been so impactful with coming out as an eating disorder survivor and can't think of the word.
Substance abuse. That was kind of her thing.
Substance abuse, yeah. Mental health survivor, like all these different things. And she uses her platform to like spread awareness and like tell people that it's okay to not be okay. But there are also some people that I guess have the opposite effect. And that's really sad.
Have you noticed that at all, Charlie?
Well, I don't know. I don't really follow that many influencers, so I'm on my timeline at least. I can't speak on that, but if it's people normalizing it, it's obviously like it needs to bring awareness. Not like some aspects need to be normalized, but not the aspect of having it. Like the aspects of talking about it and like what people are feeling need to be normalized, but not like everyone needs to have it and like it's cool to have it be normalized.
Right. It's not something you want.
Well, I was gonna say it's also not like it's not a bad thing to have it either, because it's like it's not something like oh, if you have it you're not like a bad, it's not like you're a bad person or should be ashamed. It's just like something that can be an obstacle and you just have to push through.
Totally. And kind of on that note, Shanna, I was just reminded, like, we had a conversation about this, how if somebody's opening up to you about something, it's really easy to say something like, I totally understand what you're going through. And that isn't always what the person struggling wants to hear. Sometimes relatability is comforting, but sometimes it's not a competition and they're allowed to feel their feelings. And sometimes they need you to just be there to listen, not relate to them. So it isn't a competition of, oh, I totally get that. Oh, I feel that too. Because a lot of the time you have no idea what they're going through. And so something that I can share as advice if somebody is ever opening up to you is to just hear them, because that's clearly what they need. They're not asking for you to relate to them or try to beat them as to like you get that more than they do. They just need you to hear them out.
Absolutely.
And again, shout out Real Depression Project, because they post ways to deal with exactly this scenario all the time.
Before we wrap up, I know a lot of parents are tuning into this episode, so I wanted to open our discussion and act like if we were facing not only our own parents, but anyone who is having trouble helping or providing the best care and opportunities for somebody else, like their child, who is struggling. I mean, in other words, what's something that you guys wish your parents could hear about teen mental health, or what is something that you think all parents could benefit knowing? And I want to start because Charlie, I actually like vividly remember giving you this exact advice in 9th grade. I'm sure you don't remember it now, but something that my mom taught me, and if anyone is listening that's friends with my mom, I'm sure she's shared this with you too, is this example of being on a roller coaster. We all know that life is a total roller coaster, and something that's hard when you are faced with somebody like your child, your parent, your best friend, when they're clearly on an emotional roller coaster, on a deep dive down or going upward, you want to be with them, riding that roller coaster with them. You want to go through the good and the bad and be there for them, sitting right next to them on that roller coaster. But what that can often do is strain a lot of your mental health, because you're at the same time riding your own roller coaster. And it's really hard to ride two of them at once, especially if you're on a really great time in your life and that other person is going down. It's really hard to be on two roller coasters at the same time. So something that my mom taught me is what that other person might need more than having you sit there and hold their hand on the roller coaster is holding their bag at the bottom of the roller coaster. Sometimes you need to just let that person ride the ride by themselves and be the person to hold all their stuff and wait for them once they get off the ride. And that's much easier said than done. And I'm doing a poor job at explaining this. My mom's probably going to hear this and cringe. But what I'm trying to get at is it's hard on you and that person to go through the same thing at the same time. And if they need to toughen this out on their own and go through this by themselves, oftentimes you just need to remove yourself and put up a personal barrier to protect your own peace and hold their stuff. That shows that you're always going to be there for them. You're holding everything that they need and you're still there waving to them, ride the roller coaster. But it's better to remove yourself and watch them go through that, even though you're still there for them. Not you have to look out for yourself at the same time is kind of what I'm trying to say. So to any parent, I know all you want to do is be there for your kid and go through that roller coaster with them. But as a teenager, a lot of the times you do need to go through these things alone. It's how you will grow and mature and prepare yourself for the rest of the hardships that life will face you. The three of us had to go through a lot of our stuff alone, and I think that has made us stronger people and brought us to be able to talk about this right here, right now. So it's hard to accept that, but sometimes what the other person needs is for you to just be there for them, not experience it with them. With that being said, though, back to my original question of what you guys wish other parents could hear. Do you have any advice or insights?
From me personally, I did not tell my parents what I was going through, just because like they do so much for me, and like they do so much to try and make me happy. I did not want them to think like, oh, what they're doing isn't working, and then for them to start feeling bad. Like that was me feeling like I would just end up being more of a burden of my feelings being a burden, which um when they found out like what I was going through, because I didn't tell them, what actually happened was one of our friends ended up telling the school, and then the school told my parents, and so I could tell that they were a bit upset that that they felt that it seems like I felt like I couldn't come to them, but I told them it was just like me trying to protect them, but that was not what I should have been doing, because in the end I needed the help and I should have been reaching out. And I know that there's a lot of people who are in the same spot as me where they don't want to reach out, and so sometimes it's it may need to be the parent who does reach out. And like again, I actually just found this on the Instagram page I've been recommending. It's 15 signs your child or teenager may have a mental health issue, and I'll just go through some of them. It's the first one's they've been withdrawn more and spending time more in their room than they ever have. They struggle to get out of bed in the morning, and they want quote unquote sick days from school even when they're without symptoms. They've become numb or apathetic about things they normally love. All of their grades have dropped. They struggle to engage. They seem less hopeful as they once did. They may have an abrupt shift in stuff that they liked before, and then they're also struggle to make eye contact and more sensitive, or just was some of the few ones that were listed. And so I'd say just like from a parent standpoint is if like you notice any of that, just honestly just being real with your child and just like reaching out and seeing what's up and like just trying to notice if there's anything, because I was giving off all the signals too, and my parents said that they noticed, but they also said that they probably could have done a better job of reaching out, because the signals were all there. Like usually with people our age too, there's gonna be signals of something, and so it's just if the child doesn't reach out, then it's also the parents. I think should also just try to have an understanding of what the signals can be, and then recognizing it and then acting on it.
Communication is key.
I agree with everything that Charlie just said. Something I would add is that, like, don't be scared that they're struggling. Try to help them rather than freak them out more. Like, I remember when I was in 9th grade, I was missing a ton of school. I missed 2 weeks of school. I had a really hard time getting out of bed. It was a really rough time. And I remember overhearing my mom on the phone with someone, hearing how afraid she was, and her fear made me kind of realize how bad things were. And I look to my mom for comfort. Her optimism is usually what makes me not worried. And so hearing how scared she was made me really terrified. And hearing how clueless she was of how to move forward. And I just try to protect them from that side of you that's really afraid. It's okay to be afraid. It's not an easy thing, but try to protect them from that side of you and just be there for them.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to prevent at the time, of hearing that stuff from my parents. And so that's why I didn't say anything. But looking back on it, it was so stupid not to say anything, because it made my the worst of my struggles go for longer than it needed to. Because after I told them, we just immediately started looking for help, and instead of me just doing it on my own, I had developed a whole support system within my parents.
Yeah. And I guess if you guys take anything away from this, it's just to understand that transparency and communication is key, whether you're a teen or a parent. And I know this is a common saying that's easier said than done, but this too shall pass is something that would always get me through hard times. You are on a roller coaster, and it isn't always down, even if it might seem that way at first. So I think being there for each other, being honest with your feelings, and not letting social media or the stigma, of any gender, get in the way of how you feel, because your feelings are valid and they always should be. And if you know that something is off or you want to seek help, 100% recommend doing that, because in the end, you are the only one who can protect your peace, and you are looking out for yourself, and that is the most important thing to do. And I think that's pretty much a perfect note to leave off on, since that's all the time we have for today. But Shayna and Charlie, thank you guys so much again for joining me this week and for vulnerably sharing your honest experiences and opinions with everybody listening. And to all of you, thank you so much again for listening to Spill the Soup. Before we go, as always, please make sure to show some love for the podcast by subscribing and rating 5 stars to whatever platform you're listening on and wherever else you get your podcasts. We'll see you 2 weeks from now for our next episode, so stay tuned. Spill the Soup is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. For more information, go to tcjewfolk.com/podcast or email the show at podcast@tcjewfolk.com.